Okay, hi everybody. It is Wednesday, November 26th, 2025. Something incredibly profound happened last week after the inner circle that is really, really amazing. But for people who want to understand the meditative process that I've discovered is actually very ancient, but there's something missing in the translation of Eastern teachings of meditation to the Western person and language. And that is really the science of sound and frequency added to the practice, which is a very deep science in Tibetan Buddhism, the earliest forms of Christianity. The Gnostic Christian scriptures teach us these ancient vowel toning practices. But vowel toning practices have to be what you would call pitch perfect, as opposed to just going on your own and just making sounds or chanting words at any old pitch. And if you're not at correct pitch, it's kind of like throwing pebbles in the wind. You might hit something and you might not. And the wind being really the mind and the chaos of the mind. So before we go into today's inner circle, this huge event that has occurred with 3i Atlas that is specific to this group, this is going to blow your mind. I just want to show people on my site a few things. One, that my magnetic wave coils, I got tongue-tied there, the way they work is that if you use speakers, stereo speakers for your sound work, speakers start at about 40 hertz, 39 to 40 hertz. So just to show you the different states of brain waves, delta, which is the deepest healing state, is 1 to 4 hertz. So of course the speakers cannot put out 1 to 4 hertz. And theta, which is deep relaxation, earth healing, and lucid dreaming, is in the 4 to 8 hertz range. In fact, most lucid dreaming occurs in the rapid eye movement, which means when the eyes start moving around in the brain, you're actually seeing and stimulating the visual cortex, which means you're having a visual experience in your dream, and the eyes are moving around like they do in the real world. And that happens right here in theta, and that is the frequency of Earth. So Earth frequency is, the frequency of Earth is just below 7.5 hertz, and the Tesla Schumann resonance, which is the first response standing wave to that frequency. A lot of people don't know this. The Schumann resonance is not the frequency of the Earth. It's the first standing wave in a set of standing waves in a response wave. So a response wave is not the initial wave. They're almost the same number, because the Schumann is 7.83, the Earth is like 7.48. The alpha part of the brain, which is 8 to 12 hertz, is also not possible for a stereo system. Now, headphones begin in the beta part of the brain, which is really good headphones I've tested 17 hertz. I mean, technically humans hear from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, although most humans don't really hear that well, but that's the range where humans have been tested. So that means that stereo systems miss delta, theta, and alpha waves. So by adding a pair of my coils to a system, not only do you have full frequency response, because I can put out less than 1 hertz, I can put out 1/4 of a hertz on these, but you also get a magnetic, much deeper healing response to sound. Now, some people are also asking about my meditation courses. So when you go on my website, you just click on the meditate button up here in the top, and I have a whole course called Quantum Regenesis, which is all about the vowel toning and the addition of pitch perfect vowel toning, which means you hear with headphones a tone that is actually a combination of frequencies and you match it with your voice chanting the vowel series of tones that we have in our language. And when you add your voice to the frequency is guiding you to be pitch perfect. It's exactly the way professional singers are trained. My wife, Crystal Sereda, was an opera singer and a jazz singer. I'd watch her do these exercises, and that's what really gave me the idea, because you can see the improvement in the human aura when even a singer is moving through their tonal exercises, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do have all the vowels built into them, because do is an O, re is an A, mi is an E, and fa is an ah. So there's A and there's ah, two variations of A. In fact, in the ancient systems, the vowel tonings have 7 vowels. So it's A and ah, E and eh, I, O, and U is 7 vowels. So when you take your voice and you're training to be pitch perfect, and you do this over and over and over again, within weeks you start to feel this incredible resonance happening. So this course is on my site. It actually has 3 modules, and it teaches you how to do this. When I started adding frequency and vowel toning to my practice, my meditation accelerated at an incredible rate. And when I found out, like, for example, the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, which is the language Jesus spoke, and his mother spoke, and his father spoke, and actually his whole family. The Lord's Prayer in Aramaic starts, O thou from whom the breath of life comes, who fills all realms with sound, light, and vibration. May you touch me in my utmost holiest. Let your will come true in all that is material and dense. That's the original Lord's Prayer, which completely changed throughout the history of the church. So it's addressing the breath, the sound, and the light. Now, I wanted to, before we go into this miracle that actually happened, that is a manifestation from this group of 3i Atlas, in Robert Temple's book, The New Science of Heaven, which deals with plasma as the really the embodiment, the most abundant element in the universe. And I don't mean elements on the periodic table. I mean as in fire, air, water, and solid earth, or earth, wind, and fire. You could call it like that, but it is everywhere in the universe. But this is the body of consciousness. In fact, we just went in the book, in his life after death section, the actual scientific documentation of the plasma body leaving the physical body and actually scientifically detecting it. And at birth, what's known as the flash of conception, which is this flash of light that occurs, in the embryonic stage in the mother's womb. At the moment of conception, there is a flash of light, and that's the plasma coming into the human organism as it's growing. But in this diagram here in the book, which is from a Russian scientist who wrote a book, an incredible book, that his name is Alexander Pressman, on human biology and the magnetic and electric component of a human. And just listen to this quotation under the graphic. The standing human body is largely composed of electrically conductive water and acts as an organic antenna. This is everything we've been talking about here. Receiving waves and currents from outside and communicating them to the body's interior. And that just says everything, because where this book is going in the end, which is really a masterpiece of research compilation by Robert Temple, is really profound, is that there are 3 levels of life. And the highest, so frequency and how frequencies are arranged is what's called information. because the way frequencies are arranged as information tells energy systems what to do and organizes a physical structured component, which is an apple, is being told to be an apple by information. So information tells, and this can come from the outside. This is what's really important, which means heaven or the heavens can beam information to a tree, which will transform the tree into a fruit-bearing mango or an apple. So a mango is information. It's actually information. Lettuce and tomato is information. You are your information, which is your structure. Telling, so when you came in to in the moment of conception, you're telling that family's genetics and DNA how to build you. You're actually doing it. And we don't realize this until we become conscious. So information is more powerful than energy. So the human, what he's documenting here, we have a north and a south pole. We're just like a magnet. And the magnetic field is always 90 degrees, which is coming off our sides, to the orientation of the magnet. So that's why my frequencies actually work, because I'm beyond single point frequencies. I'm using ratios of frequencies that establish a sort of musical harmony to bring the human organism into an alignment. It's now, when you're meditating, and this is where meditation can, in fact, there are studies on this, have actually harmed people, because you can't just sit there and blank out your mind, because then you're in an abject position. And abject means without purpose or form. You're just open, and anything can hit you. And when you're focused and you work with sound, which causes your magnetic field in all your cells and all the atoms and all the crystals in your bones and in the water in your body to vibrate. And due to piezoelectricity vibrations, we went through this in the year 1 of the inner circle, you start to radiate. Now when you radiate harmonically, you're attuned to a reality. So when we do the frequencies of the planets, or we do the frequencies of the stars, or we do a frequency set that's tuned to a music scale, and the way our music scale evolved was based on the vibrational interpretive frequencies of the solar system, and that means the planets. So that's why this work is so profound, because then you start getting tuned in, actually tuned in. So I want to show you what happened last week. So we kind of have to recap where we were at the end of last week really quickly, and then I'm going to go. I post these articles on my Medium page in advance, but those articles need a lot of embodiment to take a person to understand what they're actually reading. So when I go to here, this is where we were last week. And so we came to the Giza Plateau. We demonstrated the angle of the rising and setting sun at the 29.97 north latitude, which is almost 30 degrees, of where the 3 Giza pyramids are situated. And at that position, in the summer solstice, the sun rises at Jerusalem all the way to Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. So all the temples and all the locations in Jerusalem, which includes for Christians, Muslims, and Jews, because for Jews it's the remains of Solomon's temple, and for the Muslims it's Dome of the Rock, and then for Christians it's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is where Jesus was entombed and first resurrected, and Bethlehem, of course, is the birth site. Now let's just say for argument that Jesus wasn't born on December 25th, and there's good arguments against that. But this is summer solstice. The sun rises in the east at Bethlehem to the Great Pyramid, and it sets at the same angle, which is 26 degrees. I mean, 26 point, the 0.3 is arguable, so let's just say 26 degrees to the west, and rises 26.3 degrees in the east, which is pointing to a rising and setting body that is within the ecliptic, which means where the sun rises and all the planets rise and set at summer solstice. So the fact that this is happening at summer solstice, and then when you go to winter solstice, the winter solstice marker is here using SunCalc, their website for doing this work, confirms what Peter Lemaitre discovered. So here we see at Christmas, which is the solstice, because 3 days after the solstice is December 25th. Now, that's on our current calendar. The actual solstice, regardless of calendars, is the same. You can change, the date has actually changed over time. So, but 3 days after is when the new sun begins the journey in the relationship between the Earth around the sun, because it actually goes at a standstill for 3 days, which is really remarkable when you compare the 3 days biblically to Jonah in the belly of the whale and Jesus saying in 3 days I will rebuild the temple in 3 days. So that, and of course Easter being 3 days after the crucifixion. So this is very, very symbolic. And it's very possible that this is the moment when the crucifixion occurred. So we know what these angles do. Now, what really gets mind-blowing is when we came to this, which is the overlay of the opposing positions of summer solstice rising and setting above our midline and winter solstice below. So in the winter solstice, if you're at Jerusalem or Bethlehem, the sun sets at the 3 pyramids of Giza, which is incredible. So it doesn't matter what the real birth date of Christ is. What matters is where he's born, and where the Jerusalem temple complexes sit is they are at the solstice markers in alignment to the Great Pyramid from the rising and setting of the sun. And the Jerusalem temple, the original Solomon's temple, had an east and west set of doors for the entrance of the sun coming from the east and the west. And of course the sun will come through those doors at various angles on your equinoxes on different dates. So you can actually measure time in a temple with doors that are open to the east and west axis. And our equinoxes, which is fall and spring, the line is perfectly straight through the middle in this position on the planet, which again is remarkable. So that means that we did this last week, and we presented this last week, and here's the miracle. The miracle is that what happens is 3i Atlas 1 day later from last week did this. 1 day later. So let's go to the source, which is right here on Avi Loeb's. Are we seeing this correctly? Can somebody tell me, are we seeing new discovered sideways lines? Or
Yep, we can see.
Okay, I just want to make sure as I'm navigating, we're still seeing it. So all of a sudden, 3i Atlas produced, you see this streak coming at an angle? And here's our 26 degree jet here. And there's an anti-jet here, which establishes the same map that was produced in the last, this is Avi Loeb's article. So I'm going to go back to mine here. So we see what's happening. It just did this. It just did this. So it was argued When Avi Loeb actually posted this, in fact, let me go back to his post because it's incredible how open his mind is. Look what he says. Newly discovered sideways lines are likely a satellite streak or otherwise a hint of the release of smaller objects by 3i Atlas. And what he means by smaller objects are the subcraft, and they're not small at all. So to deduct that it's not a satellite streak, because it isn't, which is really easy to prove, we come back to my article here. So why did 1 day later, 3i Atlas does this, and when I measured the angle on the right, so let's do that, I got the same angle in our diagram, which is 52 degrees, which is the angle of the Great Pyramid, which is the opposing opposite of the two solstices, summer solstice up here and winter solstice down here. And on the left, I got 42 to 43 degrees. And oh my God, what does that mean? It means that if I map the time and the date of 42 degrees to 43 degrees, it comes to, that means what the sun will do at Giza. It's like a clock. The rising and setting angles of the sun on any date change from the two extreme points, and the triangle closes. So its maximum is 52 degrees, which is the angle of the Great Pyramid's surface, and then throughout time, on the opposites of those two extremes, you get a different angle, and it turns out the angle at 42, 43 degrees was the date it actually happened, which is November 22nd, 23rd. This is incredible. Can you confirm, people, you're seeing angle of sunset rise May 20th, 23rd? Somebody actually seeing this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that means, so the angle below the line is November 20th to the 23rd at 42 to 43 degrees. The angle above the line is May 20th, which is just the opposite side of the year to the 23rd. That mean up here. But at this time of the year, the sun is down here. So that means on the date this occurred, that 3i Atlas did this, which is this image here, this angle on the left from the anti-jet and this angle are the date of the photograph. Now, the argument that this was possibly a streaking satellite which intersects the core of 3i Atlas is impossible, and I'll tell you why. So, first, before I come back to that, I kind of have to use my hands. So, the image in the telescope is looking at... I have to actually go to this to document it so people see it. The actual image is here in a non-negative form. We're looking at a field of view of 16.7 by 16.7 arc minutes of view. So that's half the diameter of the moon. So if you're looking up at the sky at a full moon, it's about 32, depending on the size of the moon, because it changes in different full moons. So you're looking at a telescope that's looking at a picture this big. It's taking that much space out of the sky and blowing it up. Now, when I timed how long it'll take a satellite to go by that space, and depending on the orbital distance to the Earth of the satellite and its velocity, it's safe to say that it's less than a second for most of them, and it might be a second for the slowest ones. So what's the problem with that, and why this can't be? The reason it can't be is because the photographer took a series of photographs at 100 seconds each, and then he stacked them together. And when he does this, by stacking, that streak on only one frame, it can only exist on one frame. Because if the camera's open for 100 seconds and something streaked by in 1 second, first of all, he's exposing it 100 seconds because there's not enough light. And he's tracking 3i Atlas, which is why the stars are streaked in the background. And then he's going to take another image and another image and another image consecutively. I think he took a total of 20-something images. And when he stacks them, the tiny amount of light from the streaking satellite is going to disappear. And so we don't know, because the photographer, and I wrote him, if the streak appears on even a second frame in his 27 plus images that he took, that he stacked, you have a problem. It cannot be a satellite. And the odds of a satellite lining up like this right at the core of 3i Atlas are countless billions against it in the total volume of the sky. And when I look at in the negative, you see these black streaks here for the whatever this is that went by, or Avi Loeb suggests left 3i Atlas, which is a more stunning probability, in a perfectly straight line in both directions. Like if a comet was breaking up, it would be scattered. The pieces would be streaking all over the place. This is a perfectly straight line. And you'll notice there's this black here. There's a bit of white, then there's no white, and then there's a bit of white, and there's no white, and there's a bit of white, all in this perfect line. So I have two hypotheses. One, yes, something streaked by, but incredibly slowly, like way slower than a satellite, between Earth and 3i Atlas. And that means it came from somewhere else. And the only somewhere else I could summarize would be one of our hyperdimensional planets, namely 591. The other hypothesis is these streaks are caused by ejecta, some smaller craft, which are not small, because the thickness of this line is 1 to 2 arc seconds, and at that distance is something very huge. This is not a small object, or objects that are leaving 3i Atlas. And then the odds of it performing one day after I presented this in the inner circle means, remember what I went through in Robert Temple's book, that our magnetic field can send and receive from the outside in and the inside out, which means we as a collective and a few thousand people that saw this, as soon as this goes into human consciousness, it's getting sent out. And the very fact that, let's say 2,000 people saw this video from last week that I posted on my YouTube channel of last week's Inner Circle, did 3i Atlas read the collective imprint of this image? Because as soon as this image goes in your mind, and you're attuned to there is no universe outside this mind, which is one of my favorite things my sensei, Buddhist teacher, taught me in years and years of meditating with him in Los Angeles on Friday nights. When I could have been disco dancing, I'm meditating with a Buddhist monk for a couple of hours. This is just stunning, because this happened the next day. It's really, really incredible. And let's say, I mean, for argument's sake, I mean, I'm a photographic expert, so you cannot take 27 photographs and stack them without the stacking and say, let's say only on one image that he took, there was a streaker going by. And it perfectly aligned with 3i Atlas, which I can't accept. I can't accept that a satellite did that at this angle that would leave the angle between the jet and this lower angle at the Great Pyramid angle of 52 degrees. I just can't accept that that is just by chance. But let's say for argument's sake, okay, so let's say a satellite streaked by perfectly in concert with this. The consciousness of the photographer pointing the telescope and taking a picture at this brief moment. Like, you have to understand, it's 1 second or less that a satellite, you can just look at satellites, lie on your back in the summer, look up at the sky, and you can see a satellite going by. And so it will streak through a space half the diameter of the moon in less than a second. So it can't be in his next picture, and his next picture, and his next picture, and his next picture, 20-something images. And when he stacks them together, the negative black space starts to overwhelm the light. But if I stack images of a comet, see, this is what stacking of images of comets does. Why do they look so beautiful? Because if I take a time exposure of a waterfall, it starts to look soft and milky and beautiful over time. A comet tail is doing the same thing. So if a photographer stacks images of a comet tail over a period of actually, according to him, his exposure is 26.667 minutes. So 16 times 100 seconds. So that's actually 16 photographs, because he said they were 100 seconds each. So 16 photographs stacked on top of each other. The black of the next frame, the next frame, the next frame, the next frame is going to erase the very faint. You have to understand. So if his lens is open for 100 seconds and something streaks by in 1 second, it's not going to leave much light. Very, extremely faint on the sensor. So this cannot be a streaking satellite. So remember, Loeb had two hypotheses. One, 3i Atlas was releasing smaller craft. They're not small. They're not the size of a 30-foot flying saucer. No, you wouldn't see a 30-foot flying saucer at the distance of these cameras to where 3i Atlas actually is. So we got a problem. In fact, when this happened this last week, one day after I presented this, and the angle on the left triangle here is the date that the photograph was taken, 3i Atlas is conscious. And the beings on it, if they released a series of UAP UFOs at these two angles simultaneously, the speed of the ejecta to cover the distance from where 3i Atlas is to the end of the ejecta line, I went over this with Richard Hoagland, is incredible. It's incredible. And I'll give you an example. So a speeding bullet goes by 700 miles an hour out of a really high-powered rifle, 1,400 miles an hour. Now, you can't see that. But if I get 100 miles away from that and I blow up the size of the bullet, yes, you can. In fact, the further away I get from it, I can see it. In fact, we've even got photographs of ejecta coming out of black holes that are traveling faster than light speed. So the further away you get from an object in velocity, the easier it is to see it moving at incredible speed. So what I'm saying is the speed from the center of 3i Atlas here to get to here can be calculated if I know how many frames this streak appeared in the 16 images the photographer took. Yeah, sorry, he says right here he took exposures of 100 seconds each, which I read in the report. So that's 16 images that he stacked. And that means if it appeared in all the images, you have a serious problem. He won't tell anybody how many of those separate images, or if the software just stacked all of his digital images and threw away the individual images, because it's a software that does the stacking. So the bottom line is 3i Atlas repeated what we did 1 day later. Now, see, I'm more of, I mean, I know how science, some people, I write these blogs, I'm getting thousands of reads on these articles on Medium. I would say most people can see it who read it. But the conservative scientist who doesn't believe consciousness has any power at all is just going to make a rude, and I've had a few crude remarks where a scientist comes along and just says, you know, you're crazy. Elvis is, somebody wrote, you know, Elvis, yeah, and Elvis is still alive. Like they don't have an antithesis that's intelligent to my thesis. And it's the same thing for them. When they see data they don't like, they say, oh, that was probably a streaking satellite. You can't do that scientifically. You have to prove it was a streaking satellite. In fact, Avi Loeb has developed and deployed Project Galileo, which when we see a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UFO, he can put it through a software that eliminates the probability of it being a satellite or something in space that we have cataloged to something that is unknown, so unidentified. So he has the software capable of doing that. All you have to know is where the camera is stationed, the angle, which we know is at 3i Atlas. You look at your right ascension and declination, and you know if anything went by there at an exact period of time. But, you know, looking at how black this black line is in the stacking of 16 images, the probability is really low. But again, let's say it was, I mean, I'll go right to the bottom. Let's say the miracle happened, a satellite went right through 3i Atlas, and that's consciousness, because this maps the date that it occurred to the angle of the rising and setting sun at solstices, summer solstice here and winter solstice here on our map, and the angle on the left is the date. So that's the data. So when you understand that we are attuned, the more of us that, and this is how consciousness and intention experiments work, the more persons on Earth that are become aware of something, the more likely they are attuned to it, and the more likely that we can all have our own remote interpretation of what 3i Atlas is doing. And so that's just simply how consciousness studies have worked. Now there's another big thing that there's two more big things that happen with 3i Atlas. We're not going to get the third until next week, which is huge news about Jupiter. And you can see from our earlier inner circles, even before the discovery of 3i Atlas, everything was coming up Jupiter. So this article here, did 3i Atlas send Earth another coded message, is incredible. So if Avi Loeb's original hypothesis is correct, that 3i Atlas is so tuned to the close passes of at least 4 planets, Mars, Earth, Venus, and Jupiter, and that the odds are over 1 trillion against it when we did the mathematical odds, and my mathematical odds article is right here. So this is what happened. From Avi Loeb's article, the Meerkat radio telescope in South Africa conducted on November 5th, 2025, a search for a narrowband radio transmission from 3i Atlas. As reported here, a total of 23,689 signals were detected. All were determined to be spatially consistent with the position of 3i Atlas to not be spatially consistent, meaning they weren't coming directly from 3i Atlas, but in the close proximity of it. And thus were likely caused by human-made radio frequency interference. See, this is what you can't do in science, right here. You can't say were likely caused by human-made radio frequency interference. You can't do that. You have to prove that. You can't just... See, this is an example of when scientists see data they don't like, they come out with a whacked-out theory, and they're not following the scientific method. So they want to have it only their way, which is, if you're proving a hypothesis, you have to prove through the peer review process that indisputably that the data you're getting is correct. But if you don't understand the data you're getting, you can't just come out with a whacked out theory that a bunch of human-made amateur radio band people did this. So I immediately noticed something. In real science, you have to have an antithesis to a thesis. You also have to prove
you can't see what you're reading anymore, by the way.
Oh, no, you can't? Okay, let's stop share and then reshare. Thanks. It's really important to know. I thought we were looking at it, but something must have happened. So this is my new article. Did 3i Atlas send Earth another coded message? Okay, so I did read this, but so this is the 23,689 signals were detected. Are you seeing this now? Shiroz?
Now you can see it. Now you can see it.
Okay.
We could see.
So guess what 23,689 is. Guess what that is? It's the circumference of Venus. Because the circumference of Venus is 23,628 miles. You see? It sent us on the 5th of November. This happened. Guess where 3i Atlas was on the 3rd of November? To the 5th. It was paired with Venus. It was paired with Venus. This is Earth down here, and these are all our other cometary visitors. So when it was paired with Venus, which means it closest to Venus was the 3rd, and on the 5th, which is down here, see, it barely moved. There's 3i Atlas, there's Venus. And the odds of Venus and 3i Atlas pairing is in my mathematical odds report. And Avi Loeb noted the mathematical odds in his report. But what he didn't do that I did is what are the combined odds of 3i Atlas pairing with Mars, Venus, its closest approximation to Earth, and Jupiter combined, which was over 1 trillion to 1. So when you understand that here's Earth and here's our radio receptions equal the circumference of the planet Venus, and the accuracy is 99.725%. So Venus's 23,628 mile circumference is within 99.725% of the number of signals detected. That is unbelievably proof of intelligence from 3i Atlas. I mean, I think it's literally coming down to the kindergarten level for astronomers. And believe it or not, an astronomer wrote on this blog and made a negative comment. But most of the comments, people get this. They're saying, look, that we're at Venus, I'm at Venus, and I'm sending you the circumference of Venus. And then, of course, somebody also wrote that why did it do it in miles and not kilometers? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. It can't do both. It can't send you both. It's sending you it in miles because most of this planet was on miles. The United States is still on miles, as are some other countries, but more of the world is going in kilometers. So you could say that whatever sent the signal to Earth, and I'm proposing something different. I'm proposing the signal could have come from Venus itself, because 3i Atlas, and remember, the data says it was coming from an area around Atlas, and Venus is within a cone of radio waves to Earth, and the distance between Earth for a radio signal and Venus is probably only 4 or 5 minutes at the speed of light.
Well, miles is an extension of inches and feet, and inches and feet
right
you can get from your body, right? So isn't that part of the reason why
Well, let's
it would
see,
be
that's a good
consistent with any
observation, Charles.
planet then?
That's a good observation. So they sent us within, and of course some of the signals could have been background noise, but only a few of them. So the question is why? And then you have to go through all of your hypotheses scientifically. Remember, we're adding consciousness to this, which is what your traditional scientists cannot accept, even though we have consciousness scientists. We have the Global Consciousness Project at Princeton University, and I would like to see on the random event generators, if anybody's even watching as 3i Atlas is doing this, is anybody noticing any spikes, what are called non-random, to coherent spikes. So it did this when it was at Venus. So let's say, for argument's sake, that these background signals, remember, you have to prove the antithesis. It's not science to just say, oh, it was probably this, it was probably that. Oh, a UFO was probably a swamp gas. Like, you can't say that scientifically. Your thesis and your antithesis have to be well studied, and you have to get your data collection in order. Because consciousness is part of a relationship. So in the observer and the observed relationship, the time that an astronomer puts their telescope in the sky is they're being called in their consciousness to do that. Because we've got reports now coming in from a lot of amateur astronomers, and they're good. In fact, even Avi Loeb on his blog is reporting that their imagery is better than NASA's. Better than NASA's. And that's because NASA is covering it up. Thanks to the amateur astronomer community, and I commend all of them. I'm in touch with one of them now, and I'm asking them to drop their exposures on 3i Atlas so we can see if there's any surface detail, because there is surface detail showing up. I just need darker exposure, so they just have to increase their f-stop. A lot of them are using low f-stops, like f4, which means that the aperture in the lens is this big, whereas f22, the aperture is tiny. And when the aperture goes down, the details improve, and the the surface details will start to get much more clear. And so the fact that Atlas did this, and we've got this communication from Venus, reminds me of Nikola Tesla. And I have this down at the end of the article here. So Nikola Tesla's discovery and beliefs. In 1899, well, in Colorado Springs, where his lab was on the top of this huge mountain in Colorado Springs, I've been there, he detected signals. He ruled out causes on Earth like lightning, and publicly stated they could have originated from Mars or Venus. So Tesla got radio signals from Venus in 1899. And of course, he's one of the three great fathers of radio. Tesla, Lodge, and Stone, Sir Oliver Lodge and Stone, are the true fathers of radio. Marconi is really someone who used their patents. It was proven in a U.S. Supreme Court ruling, June 21st, 1943, that Tesla, Lodge, and Stone are the fathers of radio. So one of the fathers of radio is telling you he got a signal from Mars or Venus. And so that means the signal, because 3i Atlas was at Venus, might have come from Venus, because they're in the same direction. And of course, at the speed of light, which is the speed that radio signals travel at, it could have been Venus is recognizing that 3i Atlas is paired with us, so some intelligentsia on Venus sent us a signal exactly when it was there. So hypothesis 1, the signal came from 3i Atlas. Hypothesis 2, the signals representing the circumference of Venus came from Venus. Now, if you know the story of Valiant Thor, stranger at the Pentagon, which is a perfect humanoid, 2 men and a couple of women that landed in a spaceship and had meetings in the Pentagon. They were from Venus, and they live in the inside of Venus. And they're actually all Christians, believe it or not. And that Jesus declares in Revelation that he is, it's right here, Revelation 22:16. Jesus declares, I am Jesus. I have sent my angel to give you this testimony to the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright morning star. Now, in Isaiah 14:12, Lucifer is kicked out of the morning star. It's amazing how they got messed up, which means God is claiming dominion on Venus, and that Lucifer isn't allowed to live there, but Lucifer is allowed to live here. What does that say about Earth? And how important does this make Venus? Because, excuse me, I just got to drink some tea. How many ancient religions claimed dominion over Venus? Jesus is not the only one, because we've gone over this in the inner circle. There are many gods and goddesses who claim dominion over Venus. Venus spins counter-rotational to the known visible planets in the solar system. And there is a clear message coming from 3i Atlas or Venus or both at the time that 3i Atlas was paired with Venus in its 225-day approximate orbit around the sun. So that is, this is not disputable that this occurred. What's disputable, and this is how scientists work, like we do the same thing in our consciousness. So we are, according to the data, our bioelectric magnetic fields act as an antenna to receiving waves and currents from outside of our system. So when we get a even psychic message or an intuitive message, or we hear a voice, like I heard the voice of Jesus tell me to make those calculations on the 19th of October in 2024, and when I did the calculation, plus 432 days, I landed at Christmas Day 2025, which is coming up in less than a month. And I minus 432 days, and I came within 1 day of the Ascension Day of Mother Mary, which is actually the 14th and the 15th of August, because it depends where you are on the planet during that date. And that 3i Atlas came from the direction of the WOW signal, and the WOW signal occurred on August 15th, 1976 or whatever it was. I don't have that in front of me. So it's in that Avi demonstrated that 3i Atlas came from the direction of the WOW signal, and the probability of that in mathematical odds is millions against that being chance. So now you have an interface between tuned human beings who collectively saw my map. And there's nobody else on the planet doing this. There isn't anybody else doing this work. And what I presented on the Giza plateau, which is Jesus in Latin, as it's actually pronounced, that demonstrated the map of the rising and setting sun. I mean, if it isn't iconoclastic to show that on Christmas Day, or what you could call the winter solstice and the summer solstice, the sun rises and sets between the Great Pyramid and Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and every single point and temple within it. They're in this relationship of sunrise to sunset at 26 degrees. Changes the view of Christianity and Jesus' relationship to Egypt. And we're going to go much deeper into that as we get into Christmas. And the new news coming next week, and I'm working on it, comes from Avi Loeb's discovery. I have just a couple of minutes here. I'm going to show you the basic discovery and what I've discovered about the discovery. Here's Avi Loeb. I think he's really blown away by this. I don't believe that... Here it is. I don't believe he thinks at this point at all that this is a comet. He's presented so much data. And this article here starts with, let us suppose hypothetically that interstellar object 3I Atlas is a mothership. So here it goes again. That was designed to see Jupiter with technological devices. What would be the largest distance from Jupiter that this interstellar gardener should arrive at? And so they just found out that 3I Atlas adjusted very slightly its angle to enter the hill radius, which is of Jupiter. And of course, it's going to arrive at Jupiter on the 16th of March, which in 2026, this next 16th of March, which is Islam's Night of Power. I've been really reading up on the Night of Power, and when the Archangel meets, Gabriel meets Muhammad, he embraces him with what appears to be a hug and almost crushes him, demonstrating his enormous strength.
Mm-hmm.
And Muhammad can't read. Well, remember, most of the people in the world could not read, and most of the people in the world today barely ever read articles or even books. And we know this. They text. But at the time of Jesus in the Palestine, 97% of people couldn't read. So just to say Muhammad couldn't read is not an anomaly in history in that part of the world. But he couldn't read, and the angel hugs him and tells him to read. And he says, but I can't read. And the angel tells him 3 times, and then suddenly he can read. So that is when 3I Atlas arrives at Jupiter. And the new news is that it's just adjusted itself, according to Loeb's mathematics, to enter the gravity well. It looks like this. And once it gets inside of the gravity well, it needs a certain velocity to escape that gravitational well, or it can't. So he's proposing it's going to release its, he calls them mini probes, inside of Jupiter's orbit. And of course, Jupiter has all its moons, where hypothetically, of course, in the Greco-Roman, the god Jupiter is Zeus. And we're going to go really deep into Jupiter next week, because this new news about Jupiter is stunning. So how is 3I Atlas doing all this? The final summary is, if it's not in a hurry to do anything with Earth physically, it's demonstrating its intelligence. It's demonstrating that get ready. And it's not likely it's going to do anything in a hurry. It's going, if it's dropping off subcraft to Venus, I have even evidence of Mercury and Earth, it could drop off or communicate with the extraterrestrials that are already based here. Well, we've seen that in the new Pentagon report and the new film, The Age of Disclosure, which I watched. There's no question they're here, and they've been here for thousands of years, and they can operate within our Earth with impunity. There's going to be a reception of these beings, or whatever we want to call them, intelligentsia, and they're probably going to take their time. So don't think the world's going to end at Christmas. It's going to be very mysterious. It might do something drastic. It might do something drastic at Christmas. So by doing these frequencies and staying attuned makes us part of the reception. And I just demonstrated it, because one day after I presented the graphic, 3I Atlas gave us the graphic back. I don't know what to say. Have a great week, everybody. The replay will be here. They're always up on my YouTube channel, but I can send it out to everybody. Thank you, everybody.